Thank you and welcome to another episode of Geek USA, an all things nerd podcast where the Trekkie meets the Techie. My name is James.
And my name is Carl.
And this week we're going to be discussing the latest addition to the Star Wars universe, Rogue One. Not quite a prequel and not really a sequel, Rogue One is essentially filling in the blanks, giving us some much-needed backstory on the evil Empire's Death Star. And while the positive reviews and huge box office returns would seem to indicate that the film is a smash, the real question is it any good? Alright, so before we even get started, I would like to say and caution, spoiler alert. Geek USA is a no-holds-barred podcast. The conversation typically goes places that we can't even expect or plan on. And in regards to a movie that's still in theaters, we're pretty much going to dissect this thing every which way. So if you have not seen Rogue One and you do not want to know what happens in any way, shape, or form, you should stop listening and come back to this later. So Miles, how was it?
Really good.
Yeah? So, what made it really good?
Lots of action.
Okay. So, how do you rank this movie with the other Star Wars movies?
Best one.
Best one? Wow. Why is it the best one?
Action.
Okay.
Some funny parts in it.
So, all the things you want in a Star Wars movie.
Lots of drama.
All right, Carl. So, Rogue One was released in theaters last week, and you and I both went and saw it in a uncharacteristically timely fashion. Typically, I think we either see the movie in the Dollar Saver Theater or we're renting it. So, in the... Well, it's like a $5 theater now. So, I don't know. I'm just inflating things. So... What's wrong?
I just hit record.
Oh, that's okay. So we're gonna.
God damn it! I'm fired.
So we're gonna start off with let's break down what Rogue One has been in terms of its pop culture impact. So this movie was released like 2 weeks ago, and I think we talked about this a little bit earlier in the year about how, is it going to be a huge success, or is it just going to be something that satiates the whets the appetite of fans, and this thing has been a smash. Like, as we stand, and it is still in theaters, folks. $700 million at the box office. So anytime you come close to $1 billion, you did something good. The movie for really what is a standalone story that is not really going to serialize, in any way, shape, or form. That's pretty remarkable because I think most. Well, go ahead.
I mean, we're talking that much money in roughly not even 2 weeks? 2 weeks? Roughly around there?
It was released on the 16th. Yeah, so we're at just the 2-week mark. So, yes. So I went to see it in theaters the day before or the day after Christmas, and we went to like the very first showing, and I thought like this movie's been out a week. This will be good. I'm going to take notes, so I kind of want to sit in the back so I can like take notes on my phone, and hopefully there won't be anybody there. Carl, the theater was packed. Like there was 3 empty seats at like 10:30 in the morning the day after Christmas for a movie that had been out for 9 days.
Yeah, my experience was a little different. I saw it incredibly early the week after. I wouldn't say the theater was empty, but when I saw it, it certainly wasn't packed. Maybe the theater that early was half full and was all people like me in their mid-30s and maybe a little older.
Well, and so the lead off of this is going to be an interview I did with Miles, who we had on the previous Star Wars podcast, and his opinion is, because you haven't heard the interview, but essentially he says Rogue One is the best Star Wars movie ever. And I said, really? How can it be the best? And he said, easy. Lots of action. It looked real. And I wasn't bored. And I said, were you bored? And I mean, that was essentially like, it stands up. He said that he still ranks A New Hope as the worst, and this is the best, which is interesting because, as we both know, and we'll get into, this movie is essentially the prequel to A New Hope and leads right up to it. So
Right.
I thought that was a very interesting review from Miles. So to set the table, the movie has been out for 2 weeks. It has been a hit. The critical reviews have been mostly positive. I've read multiple people say it's the best film since Jedi, since Empire, since, and you know what I mean? Like everybody's putting it up there with the original three. So what I want to know from you is, what are your initial impressions from Rogue One?
I really didn't like it.
Wow.
I mean, it's it wasn't horrible, but it's no Robot Jocks. But
The bar is
all
high.
kidding all kidding aside on that one, we've talked about this before. I don't mind cookie cutter with like plot and organization, because I mean, you know, stories are what they are. It's kind of hard to think of brand new things in all aspects. But the dialogue was just so, I don't know what to say about the dialogue. It just seemed like, it definitely seemed like it was obviously a kids movie, but they make obvious kids movies. Like they make movies like Inside Out, right?
Totally. Yeah.
A kids movie, fantastic dialogue, and then they make this, which to me seemed a lot like a kids movie, and just seemed like the dialogue was, everything was a stereotype of an archetype, like down to the last word. I just didn't enjoy it. Maybe it's because I'm an adult, maybe it's because I'm a curmudgeon, I don't know, but did not find it that enjoyable of a flick. Lots of action though, and it looked really good.
Well, yeah, I mean, when I left the theater, I was thinking to myself, this movie was a solid B minus. But in retrospect, as I've been reflecting back to get ready for this podcast, I definitely am in your camp that I think it wasn't good. It looked like Star Wars in all of the right ways, but it did not feel like Star Wars. And really, I think there is a couple major flaws with the film from a storytelling angle. But despite all of that, I couldn't help but think every moment of the film, like, this could be better. This could be better. This could be better.
Absolutely.
And it was simple choices. And I didn't really think about that, but you might be right. It might have just been like, we're trying to make this palpable to a younger audience, whereas if we had gone for a more, maybe a little higher brow theme with some things, maybe it would have just translated better. I'm surprised with the success. I was surprised with the reviews. Perhaps at this point, we just have to admit that if you slap Star Wars on it, it's going to be a hit, because I'm kind of confused.
Absolutely.
How do you feel this measures up to last year's movie? Does this make you that much more excited for episode 8, or are you considering it something different?
It made me much more excited for episode 8, because I'm coming to grips with the fact that these standalone movies, it's very possible that they are only going to be there to bring in younger people to continue to do that, continue to farm. I've lost excitement in the Han Solo flick and all that, and the Fett flick. But so I'm much more excited about. Well, yeah, I'm much more excited about 8, because I think that it's become obvious to me that with 8 they're at least trying to appease everybody, and I at least fit into everybody. Now that in the age group that we're in now, we are everybody. We are no longer the people that they try to bring in for film. So 8, I'm still excited for, because I thought 7 was good. I don't want to trash the movie too much. They did some very impressive things with it. First off, it looked phenomenal. The Tarkin and Leia, holy crap! The Tarkin, how they made Tarkin. Man. Yeah, and was one of from things that I've read, it was one of the most costly monetarily and time-wise things to make Tarkin. And I forgot the actor that they got to do it, but boy, oh boy, did he do a darn good job. And so they had a guy obviously do Tarkin's movements, and it was his voice. It was the guy, the actor. It was his voice. And then, of course, they just used the computers and everything to make it look more, to make his face look more Tarkin. But it was impressive, and Leia's was, darn it, Guy Henry did Tarkin.
See, I don't do you see, my only that was going to be one of my gripes is it was good, but it's just not quite there yet. Like we're still 10 years
No.
away. So why not? Because Tarkin can be a hologram. He doesn't have to be like there why not just choose to make him be a hologram? And then then the quality won't matter. Why does Leia like I would have almost preferred they recast or found another way around it, because I feel like those two specific things you just said are going to really date this film in a way that the CGI dates Phantom Menace, now.
I agree. I was impressed with the way it looked, but I agree with you. It would have been more exciting if they would have just redone it. I mean, it made sense when they did it in Terminator Salvation because they were taking this is the model of a robot they made, so it makes sense that they're all supposed to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. But
I think it looked better in that movie too.
Geez, it was good looking. And a lot of action going on when they did it. I mean, Tarkin wasn't moving around too much. Leia, she just
which might have
smiled
been
at
the
us.
problem, because he was just standing there, and I was sitting in the theaters I didn't realize it was I'm glad you pointed out it was like an actor's voice and stuff, because I was confused. It didn't sound quite right. Obviously didn't look right. I was like, it was kind of distracting almost, but.
I thought it didn't look right, and you could tell when I saw it. I'm like, they definitely did something here, but it wasn't like when I saw Avatar and thought, this doesn't look real at all. This still, like, I know it was supposed to be like the computers did so good, the graphics are so good, you could hardly tell. Like, no, I could tell. Like, it just looked like a really good looking cartoon. It wasn't to me like Avatar was. It looked pretty close. You could tell, but had I not, I'll put it this way. Had I never, seen big 7-8 foot tall blue creatures with weird tails running around, I definitely, still would have known that Avatar was done with computers. Had I not known that there was a guy who once played Tarkin, I wouldn't have been able to tell. I only could tell because I've seen his face and I heard his voice before. Other than that looked like to me like a real person.
Well, and it's come a long way, that's for sure. So what I want to do is I want to kind of run through the story and get your reactions on just the actual plot. And then at the end, I think we're going to kind of talk about what worked and what didn't work in more detail, which what you just touched upon was definitely a big chunk of the ending problems for me. So the movie essentially is filling in the gaps with the Death Star and what is leading up to the opening of A New Hope, with Princess Leia being captured, the plans, all of that jazz. So we get a flashback to 20 years ago with Galen Erso, who apparently is the only guy that can figure out how to finish this thing that he started, which I was kind of confused on, because it's a Death Star, aren't there hundreds of people working on this thing, and what is he designing that is so impossible to finish? It was just, I don't know, that part kind of confused me. But
they flat out said it in the movie a couple times. They didn't need him to finish it anyway, so I was confused as to his importance.
Exactly. So, but anyways, he's important.
Plot device.
They come and exactly. They come and capture him. My first thing when I was watching the film is, the first thing I thought is, why do you park so far away from his igloo?
I know, that's the exact thing I thought. Really, there's you're covering a mile and a half, and it's flat ground, so it's not like if you park far away, they're not going to see you coming. They literally could have made that a 30-second walk. I don't know what the big deal about that was.
What we need to do, guys, is we need to capture his wife and his kid, or not. Let's park 20 minutes away so that they can all hide. So anyways, they take him. His wife comes out, and I was confused. Do you think she was that part of the plan, that she was going to come out and try to essentially save him, or was she just committing suicide, or was she, because that was dumb too. Now nobody can take care of our daughter, you moron. Why didn't you just stay hidden? You know what I mean?
I almost said that out loud. I saw the movie by myself in the theater, and I almost said that out loud. What the hell? What about your daughter? I was speechless, but I wanted to say it. They definitely wanted to give them plenty of time to get away, that's for sure, because we needed the dramatic build up and the music and the hiding and the blah blah blah. But I definitely don't think it was a part of the plan, and she is stupid.
And so then, basically, the daughter Jen is on her own, and Forrest Whitaker comes, a very interesting Forrest Whitaker comes and saves her, and then we just fast forward 15 years later.
Life hasn't been the same for Forrest Whitaker since Battlefield Earth. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
his career for the last 16 years has been, I mean, there's been some good flicks in there, but the characters he's played, Poor Forrest Whitaker.
Well, so what bummed me out was the fast forward. Like I kind of wouldn't have mind seeing a 2-minute montage. I have no idea what they did together, and the next time you see them together, you're confused because it seems like she hates him, and we don't get any backstory. What we get is 7 different planets in the first 3 minutes, which is kind of confusing, and then we get
Oh my gosh, yeah.
fast forward to Bodhi Rook, he's a defecting pilot from the Empire who has got a holographic message from Galen, who apparently has been working for 15 years to finish the Death Star, and he's trying to take it to Jeddah, which is this like desert moon, and he's trying to take it to Forrest Whitaker's character. But the issue is that Forrest Whitaker's character, what is his name? Why am I forgetting his name? Well,
It's Saw Gerrera.
Okay, so Saw Gerrera. So he's gone straight up militant, and he is, they obviously his minions capture this pilot and take him to him, but he's not so convinced of the authenticity of the message, and it kind of looks like we have an anti Darth Vader because his Forrest Whitaker's he's got like a robot suit with a breathing mask. Like, what's going on there?
Again, a stereotype of an archetype. Like he it was such a weird character because he shows up to save and raise Jyn Erso, played by Felicity Jones, and then we get nothing, and we get this blurb of an explanation that you left me, and yeah, it's like now like she's got 2 dads with I guess kind of the same problem, both abandoned and both for really good reasons.
Man, that My Two Dads show was rough. That
yeah, right, yeah, and that. Oh, I lost my train of thought, and then all of a sudden he's gone. So again, plot definitely a device to move that plot along. The whole opening of the movie seems just strung together by, I don't know, like it just seemed like a movie that was reshot a lot with a bunch of different ideas, and then again, when they finally get over the opening and they get to all this stuff and they finally get to him and the plans, again, same thing. Thrown together character, you're right, kind of like the anti-Darth Vader. Maybe there's no story there, but maybe a man consumed by his own revenge and consumed by his own anger.
I think there is a story there, and it's probably a really good story. We just don't get to hear it.
Probably.
And it probably didn't need to be more than like a 10-minute scene. But again, but anyways.
But before we go on, I just want to ask you a question. Okay, so here's a guy that was heavily involved in the building of the weapon, and you're going to talk about this in a second. Well, actually, no, I'll bring this up after you bring up after you explain, what they see when they get to the message.
They need to. Well, I guess I'm fast forwarding over the part you wanted to talk about. Maybe you'll talk about your thing first, and then because I'm going right to the ending scene. So.
Oh, I was because I know how you run down plots, and I knew you were going to get to it. So when Jyn and everybody they all get captured, right? They all get captured. Well, Jyn gets captured by the Alliance because they hear about this about these plans, and then the whole plot kind of boils down to. So we get Jyn meets Cassian, played by Diego Luna, who, by the way, is a fantastic actor, and then his funny robot, played by Alan Tudyk, who is also, by the way, a fantastic actor. So they all have to essentially go try to get a look-see at this message because it's going to Saw, only to Saw, and Galen doesn't know, that Jin's in play here. So Galen wants to get the message to Saw. The rebels want to get to the message and think that Jyn Erso, Galen's daughter, is the best way to do this because they think now this is somebody that militant Saw Gerrera will finally,
because otherwise they'll shoot the messenger and they won't get to talk to him.
Right.
So that's their plan for her, and she is just this unwitting pawn that I think you never really get a sense for what her motivations are, but she's being used by everybody.
The reluctant anti-hero.
Yes.
Kind of like a plot prostitute.
Maybe.
Continue.
So the interesting thing too, I thought, was in her rescue scene in the beginning of the movie when she's taken to the council and they hatch this plan. I liked that for once we have a droid that is a droid that can actually do something. Like he's strong, He's clever. He's witty. He's smart. He's
My
strategic.
favorite character in the whole movie.
Same here. Same here, by far. It was such a anti-C-3PO in a lot of ways. So they go to Saw, and they go to basically find him, and it's a very confusing scene when Jin is first introduced to him, because he's like, did they send you to find me? Is this a trap? Is this a trick? Huh? And he's all acting confused, and she's confused because she's not seen him. It's only been 15 years since he rescued her, is what we find out. So when did she see him last? Because if he raised her, it couldn't have been 15 years ago. It had to have been 2 years ago or 5 years ago, right? I mean, she wasn't. So it's confusing because they look at each other like they haven't seen each other in a lifetime, but she has to have seen him recently. So that part doesn't make sense. But either way,
No, yeah, they never really touched on. Well, again, I mean, there's
no fill-in. We just don't know what happened.
There were too many stories that they wanted to tell, and they again did the same thing that I thought they did with the last Star Trek film. Was they didn't give enough time. There isn't enough time. It's one movie. You don't have enough time to tell all these stories. It's one of those moments where I started to wish that you guys should have just focused on one story or two stories, maybe her and Cassian. You know, maybe these are the two people whose stories you focus on, and only these two. And you don't have to, like, you can mention things and upbringings and then this and that, but when you start opening up the door with those kinds of details, you're leaving too many questions about a story that you never really had the intent to tell, and that's what makes it kind of like a fractured. For people like us in our age group, we're not kids anymore. You know, we don't enjoy movies that are borderline horrible like Robot Jocks or things like that. We're adults, and we want to actually enjoy a good movie.
I'm expecting a linear progression that I can follow and that makes some sense. I'm not even looking for like above and beyond that. Like, really.
You sum up my run-on sentences so well.
So the other thing that was interesting, just because now they're on Jeddah and they've gone to see this message. And what do you know about kyber crystals? Because again, the Empire is on Jeddah. They're like right around the corner at the gas station, fueling up on kyber crystals while all this is going on, unbeknownst to them that the Rebel Alliance has essentially come and has this plan that they're also looking for. But they don't ever really say. There's a little bit of importance to the kyber crystals that a couple new characters that are introduced, including Chirrut, who's the blind sort of Jedi, not a Jedi, but he's a spiritual guide essentially that they just come across. He makes a comment about them, which kind of lets you know. Have you heard of kyber crystals before this movie?
Yeah, the stereotypical Asian martial artists did tell us that they are used to power the lightsabers, but no. And
so
again,
isn't that a point you want to expound upon, considering that
I was actually going to ask you the same question because we all know that you read and that I don't, and I was maybe going to think that you read this in a book, one of the Star Wars books or something.
It might be canon, and I'm not sure, but in the focus of this movie, like this planet, and then essentially what happens in the next scene, which is that the Empire decides to destroy the planet for reasons unbeknownst to the characters that are on the planet, or they don't destroy the planet, but they destroy this area of the planet, and thus erase this like cropping of kyber crystals. You're led to believe that this is like the mine to get them, and that they're important, and that they power the Death Star, and that they also power lightsabers. So they seem like a very important thing, and now they're removed from play. But I'm still not even real. I don't even think we see what one looks like in the whole movie, except for the one that's around Jin's neck. So, kind of just again, like there could have just been a little bit of filling in or backstory on that, because I feel like those sound a lot more cool than midichlorians. Like, I'm way into this kyber crystal thing. It sounds like sounds like a mystical rock. They're forged from the hottest stars or whatever. It sounds awesome. Like, can I see one? Can I see what they are? Can I see what they look like? How are you mining them? I mean, again, we're talking a 10-second something. They could just show me something. Instead, there you see them, and then the Empire destroys them. And so Jin and her compatriots, now that she is privy to the message that her father was trying to get out, which is essentially that he has built in a defect to the Death Star that can make it vulnerable to attack. You know, they exit the planet, and then the planet is essentially destroyed.
Yeah. Okay. So here's where I wanted to ask you my very important question. Here's a guy who is building the Death Star, right? He is able to build a flaw in the Death Star that nobody else can see, which I mean, come on. Like, there's got to be like a quality control
Did you see
department
the graphic
who
of
like
it?
reviews this thing.
I'm kind of
Yes.
confused how nobody
Yeah.
saw it. Like,
Yeah, right. It's like one line, and it's. I mean, I've seen this before in a movie. I when I was a kid. So here's a guy who built the flaw in it, is the only one who knows it's there. It's a very simple. It's like one tube with an opening at the end of it. So he smuggles this message out, right? He couldn't just draw this up on like a napkin. Like, he couldn't like just scratch it out and take a picture of it and send it with this message. Like, he sent the message saying, "Hey, if you get the plans, you'll know by the way, they don't exactly know where this flaw is, so they would have to get the plans and pour over them, something that the Empire's quality control department couldn't do to figure out." I'm just assuming they have a quality control department. So do you find it at all stupid that he just didn't put the flaw like in this one message and just call it a
well,
day?
the best part of it all is that essentially, so then everybody goes back to the council or to the Republic, not the Republic, the Alliance, and
Alliance, the Rebellion, whatever we're calling
yes,
it in this
and
movie.
they go, and essentially the message was, "Hey, I really foobarred this thing, but you need to go break into this place called Scarif, which is essentially like the bank from Ocean's 11, and you need to you need to like do something impossible to get the plans, and then when you find the plans, then you can find the defect." Like, wow, thanks, buddy. Like, that doesn't help anybody. Like, you couldn't have just told me what the defect was.
Great
and he
work.
does say it, but like they need the plans to see where it's at because it's as big as a moon. What's interesting is then again, this so-called like Rebel Alliance essentially is all like, "Oh, well, that's not going to work. We're done. Let's just give up." And you've got this person who like really has no motivation to help them. I mean, the whole movie you're watching and you see Jenna Erso is really, she's, I think, trying to find her past or connect with her father. You don't really know what she's trying to do. They don't do a good job of explaining it, but she's not part of this war, and she makes that very clear. And essentially, she's the only one who wants to go and do the suicide mission. So they all suck. And essentially, the fact that her and her friends have to steal ships and go do this, like unbeknownst to the leadership there, right? Like they all essentially just pile on a ship and leave.
Yeah, it seemed a little easy to you.
Yes. Well, again, the whole thing was just kind of like,
And you know who? So all right. And every time a ship takes off from a Rebel place or an Alliance place, there's that guy in the tower watching it with the binoculars. What does he do? And then why didn't he do it when the Rebel ship that takes off and he's just sitting there like, I guess I got nothing to do here. So does he literally just sit there and he doesn't like take pictures of anything until something takes off?
It's such a good point. But Jin and Cassian, they go to basically take care of this. Before this, of course, Jin is found. She realizes, they go and they try to extract her father first, and he gets killed, and they leave with her not being able to save him, but she gets a final parting scene. That whole section of the movie felt weird and convoluted because I'm still confused what the point of it was, other than to reunite her with her dad, only to kill her dad. But it doesn't.
I have no idea why Cassian didn't have a problem killing the guy. Like I have no idea why he cared that much not to do it. I mean, I would have done it. I don't know why.
They'd only
I don't
been
know
together
what his
for 12
problem is.
hours. There was no love interest there. Like, there's no. You're completely right. He should have just pulled the trigger. Instead, he risked the whole thing. And then the other thing I thought when I was watching that part of the movie was, so you built a defect into the Death Star, thus giving everybody the chance to destroy it. But if you really felt strongly about destroying it, why not build something into it that would ensure its destruction? Like a timer, or like you know what I mean? Something that like you don't have to put hope and pray that it will take care of itself. Like, isn't there isn't there a moral argument to be made that by leaving it to chance, he was essentially still, compliant in its construction and whatever destruction it brought to others?
We're all supposed to forget about that because they quote unquote could have finished it without him. We're all supposed to forgive. This is one of those things that's really hard to do, is build a villain into a movie that you can somehow get attached to or somehow not hate. We kind of, and they kind of did it through with Darth Vader by the end of Star Wars. We all didn't hate Darth Vader, even though he's kind of a genocidal lunatic. But I don't, again, that's hard to do. So in this one, they try to rope-a-dope our feelings, essentially. They try to say, here is one of the most horrible people in the galaxy. Oh, well, no, he was forced to do it. Oh, no, he was kind of not forced to do it, but they didn't need him to do it anyway, but he still hung around.
But don't you think there could have just been a cleaner way of telling that part of the story that just made it easier to understand?
Just pick a side. Just make him a good guy or make him a bad guy. Don't make him this
conflicted hero.
Don't leave the decision up to me. You're telling the story. Don't leave it up to me to make this up. Is he a bad guy? Is he a good guy? Maybe he's a bad guy and his daughter doesn't care. There's nothing wrong with that. We can anybody with a parent or a child can understand this kind of a concept.
Well, give me more backstory.
By the way, did you find it weird that so the Death Star is big, right? We're talking decades of work. The thing is the biggest structure probably ever created in the universe. Did you find it odd that it took 6 engineers to do that? Only 6. I mean, there's they're probably the only people with PhDs working on the Death Star. There's 6 of them all in that one installation. You could just kill them all
Carl,
at once.
I've never understood anything about the Death Star, and I've always wanted to know more. And I thought this movie was going to be the opportunity for us to finally learn really what this thing is and what's inside of it. And because when you were a kid, didn't you have all those questions? Didn't you wonder, God, what is it? What is it like inside? And where are the hangars? They don't show you anything. They don't show you this.
I wanted to know all of that.
And but again, it didn't have to be a movie that was, I was talking about this with somebody I work with, and they were kind of like, well, it sounds like you just wanted it to be a little bit more nerdy. But it's a movie about the Death Star. Yeah, I'm not asking for blueprints and stuff, but I'm just talking about a couple scenes where we see them actually building parts of it, or we see an inside shot where, we kind of see the guts of this thing. That's all. It was a missed opportunity to explore something that I think people our age have spent 3 decades wondering about, and you don't see anything.
Do you think? No, you don't. No, they don't tell you anything. You don't see anything. They don't explain anything. It really was kind of a letdown because we've had 3 movies focus around this thing, and none of them really tell anything about it. Do you think it was a union job, or do you think that was a right to work galaxy? Or
I would assume it's right to work, especially with
slave labor. Yeah, you have no right to say no in the Empire. Maybe I don't know.
So, yeah, I don't know. It would stand to reason that it was going to be some sort of forced environment. Otherwise, how else would you get an entire crew of people to be complicit in something that's essentially going to make it, vulnerable to attack? So the other thing.
Yeah, how many you figure there would be more defectors? I mean, that thing has to be manned by thousands and thousands, and if not, I don't know, millions of people. One defector, really, one cargo pilot, only one per. Well, all right. I'm assuming not all of them know that they're building. I mean, maybe 25% of them might know the real purpose behind what that thing does. You know what I mean? The guy sweeping and cleaning the floors and the guy repairing ships in a hangar might not have a clue. But out of all those people, one person defects to Urso and the pilot.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, you're building a weapon to destroy planets. All these engineers, right? You've got all these other engineers and all these other intellectual people, non-intellectual people, working stiffs, smart people, stupid people. Out of all these people, only 2 people think that this is no bueno, and then they're the only ones who defect.
Let me ask you just one little side point here. Let me ask you a couple questions. How old is Luke Skywalker at the beginning of A New Hope, which is essentially the same time as the end of this movie? 20 years old, 25 years old, something like that?
I mean, with the way he whines, I would have thought 16, but probably we're supposed to believe he's early
Let's say
20s.
he's 20 years old. So that means that Anakin Skywalker is 20 years older than he was at the end of Attack of the Clones. So that means that the Death Star's construction, if they started building it the second that his kids were born and that he was told that they were, his wife was dead, that would mean that they had 20 years to get it to the point you see it in this movie. 20 years to build the Death Star, 20 years to build the Great Pyramid. Ancient aliens? I think there might be a connection here. So that was another thing.
Yeah, there might be.
So, because it's essentially the ancient pyramid, in space. So,
yeah, right. At least with the way that they've explained, Palpatine,
Yes.
right, and how Palpatine operates, and he had so many things on the back burner for
I see what you're
decades, and people
saying.
thought he
Yes.
was dead. Yeah, so at least I can believe, because they at least show a picture of it in the third flick, and I can at least, or the second one, I can at least believe that he had that in the works already. In fact, we know that he did. I can at least even suspend disbelief a little bit that he had already been having it built, because that's just how that guy rolls. That being said, when you watch science fiction or space operas, you're used to suspending disbelief. There were quite a few things in here that made it even hard to suspend disbelief for even a science fiction franchise.
So essentially, to wrap up this movie, Jin, Cassian, all of their friends, they pile on the ship. They go to Scarif. They pull an Ocean's 11. They hatch a crazy plan. They attack on all fronts. The Rebel Alliance gets wind that this is happening. They swoop in to help out, and eventually, the plans are finally, and we'll get to this because it doesn't make any sense, but the plans are finally in the hands of the Rebel Alliance, and they swoop away. And then, for the second time in the movie, the Death Star destroys, everything on the planet. Everybody you've watched in this movie up to this point is killed, one way or another, either by gunfire or by a big tidal wave. And the intention of these two scenes where the Death Star, does this kind of destruction is to, I think, give you some more investment, so that you feel how amazing this weapon is and how crazy it is and how they have to stop it. But I'm so over all of these people that I actually felt a little like, let's just erase everything. Good call. I was actually kind of for it. And then the best scene of the movie, and I don't know if you'll agree with this, but the part of the movie that really left me feeling like this was salvageable is the final 5 minutes. And so it is the 5 minutes that brings us up to the beginning of A New Hope, where Darth Vader has, he's come to this battle, and he's going to take care of business himself, and he enters aboard what is Princess Leia's ship to get the plans, and he, for the first time, I think, in any of these movies, probably since The Empire Strikes Back, he is badass, and he takes care of business.
Yes.
And he does things that I've only seen him do in video games. I've heard about it. I've heard he can do these things, but I finally see him do them, and he does them to great effect. And then the princess gets away, and you know what's going to happen next, that they're going to capture her ship and help me, Obi-Wan, you're my only hope, and all of that. And so that part of the movie is great. Everything else up to that point in that final, it's like a 45-minute final scene, like final firefight. I don't know. It looks great.
It was like they took the plot of Ocean's 11, right? And the desperate nature and like Guns of the Navarone, right? Like nobody's getting out of here alive. And then the ending to the movie GoldenEye, and smashed it into 40 minutes of destruction. I was relieved when they all died, because I don't know. I wanted them all to bite it. I didn't like any of them except the robot.
But again, because the Star Wars universe is so vast, it could have been very probable and that some of them survived, and that in the movies that you watch that are coming up, that they're there in the universe. You're not focusing on them because it's a story about Leia and Luke and Han Solo, but Jin could have lived. She could have just been one of the pilots, that you never. And so I thought it was, again, it kind of sucks to watch a movie and you want me to be invested, but then you're going to kill everybody. So I'm kind of confused. You don't have to kill them. You just chose to, and it doesn't really serve any sort of, it doesn't help the narrative. Because I wasn't invested in the first place. If you had left them alive and then, brought them back in maybe episode 8, in cameos or whatever, it might have been cool, but you just killed them all. So they're all dead, everybody.
You killed a bunch of characters that I don't know. I just don't care about. I don't really care whether or not they live or die. Obviously, if they were real people, I'd care. But as a plot device, I really don't. I don't care here either way. Why wasn't this movie a cat and mouse game between Darth Vader and the rebels?
It should have been.
Why wasn't this movie the whole time? They get the plans at the beginning, and the whole movie is Rogue One trying to get the plans to Princess Leia while ducking badass Darth Vader the whole time. Why didn't I see Darth Vader fighting Jin and Cassian in half of this movie? Jedi versus non-Jedi. I mean, this is essentially a big chunk of what the rebels had been fighting was Darth Vader, his hold on the systems, and this is his. I mean, you think Darth Vader is going to leave the final construction of the Death Star up to just these two, I don't know who these people, governors or whoever these people are. Like for the whole last 20% of it, he wasn't just living on the Death Star. Why wasn't this between him and the rebels?
And honestly, judging by the reaction of people in the theaters when he came on screen, which was just overjoyed, it probably should have been a bigger part of the movie because it was clearly the climax. The climax of the movie wasn't the final firefight. It wasn't the plans getting beamed through. It wasn't, Jen and Cassian, embracing right before their death. The climax of the movie was the epilogue, which is the, Darth Vader boarding the ship. That was the best part of the movie. So you're completely right. And everything you just said sounds like a way better movie. I was like completely blown away by how good everything looked in converse to how shoddy the storytelling was, especially the last 40 minutes, because it looked so good. I mean, explosions and AT-ATs and like all kinds of new stuff. It had a very Mission Impossible type vibe, like we're going to have to do this, 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 which I'm not a big fan of, like the video game storytelling device in a movie where essentially we're going to take 40 minutes of a film and the plot is you have to do A, B, C, D, E, and F to get to G, because it's kind of like you're playing the video game. You're going from point to point.
Yes.
And then if you are going to do that, it should make sense. So again, I'm watching it and you have the plans and they're on this disc and you need to go up a big elevator and put the disc in the 8-track player and you need to hit play and then they beam up into space. But there's a shield. And so apparently the 8-track radio waves can't go through the shield. So we need to tell the Alliance to lower the shield. But I can't tell them to lower the shield until I lower the shield to tell them to lower the shield so that I can beam the... Like, it was so... Like, Carl, every time they explained it, I was like, this makes no sense. Like, what are you talking about? The plan should have been that I've got the disc and that I'm going to get in a ship and leave the planet, but Darth Vader's coming down and we're going to have to fight through him to get off this planet. That should have been the final part of the movie. Not beaming some... It didn't make any sense. Like, can you explain to me what was happening? Like, I'm still kind of confused on, like, all I know is that we saw an Imperial Star Destroyer crash into this, like, atmospheric shield, and it looked really cool. But I'm still confused in how it happened.
That did look really... Did you think that was a little too easy? So you get these B-bombers, right? You fire a few ion torpedoes, and then you just ram it, and then that just fixes... I mean, why didn't you just take down the whole Empire this way?
Exactly, because you probably have 10 of those in hangars. You can take down every Star Destroyer, just crash them into each other. Apparently, you can just push them like little tugboats. Yeah, it made no sense.
Right. I think that the whole point of that whole ending scene was to give every character we didn't care about and couldn't get attached to their dramatic send-off. They all have to do like their little dramatic part to the end, and like everybody has to do it, which when everybody has to do it and you don't care about the characters, it really loses its effectiveness. The only character I was sad to see fight to the end and die was the robot.
Yeah.
Everybody else could kind of come and go. Even the robot was a little stereotype of a robot. He was a smart aleck, and that's fine. I think the whole idea that nobody knew what was going on, but everybody knew what they had to do. They had to get this shield down that nobody had any intelligence on. Like, nobody knew. Like, you didn't know. Just shooting at the shield wouldn't do it. Like, you're the rebels. You're the Alliance. This is a big planet. You've got to know something about this shield. It just seemed like there's no way that this is a rebel alliance that's been fighting the Empire.
Oh, no, totally.
Like, this is not an organized military unit. Oh, and by the way, so, like when we watch A New Hope, Leia's ship is captured, and she says that the Senate won't sit still for this. We're on a diplomatic mission, and and Darth Vader says, "No, you're not. I know you're a spy. I don't got the proof, but I'm going to figure it out." And it, this movie kind of makes that seem laughable because you literally just got done escaping a terrorist attack on the planet. And that's like the line you're going to give. It kind of like, it really, in my opinion, for what I would be putting in my head and imagining what happened a day before Darth Vader gets on Leia's ship was not this.
Carl, that is
was
a
not
great
this
point.
obvious terrorist attack, and now all of a sudden, like, you're going to use that line, and we're all supposed to believe that this has again been some sort of a. They give the vibe that this whole thing has been a cat and mouse game between a group of planets who don't want to be in the Empire, a group of planets who do want everybody to be in the Empire, and then this weapon being designed to bring everybody together, not a big open warfare terrorist attack on a planet, then moments later you're being chased down by Darth Vader.
I hadn't even thought of that. Jesus, man, this movie sucks. God, you're so right. Like, that is such a good point. And, you know, even like with the characters that we didn't care about, like the blind Jedi who I felt like he, at the very end, he was wanting his, like, staff to be a Jedi, like, lightsaber, and it just wasn't. But I think it looked like it had a kyber crystal in it, so I was kind of confused. Like, I thought he was going to be, like, going to have a final lightsaber scene or something, and he just doesn't end. It was such a bummer. Like again, with every character, you're missing an opportunity to, like, do something cool with them, even if it's going to be in a Blaze of Glory style thing. And everything leading up to A New Hope, after seeing this movie, I watched the first 30 minutes of A New Hope, like, a couple days later to see, does it fit into it? And kind of like to just, piggyback off what you just said, it doesn't. It doesn't work backwards to this movie. And it feels like this movie should have taken us right into the middle of Empire Strikes Back. Like, maybe right after the Battle of Hoth. Or because that's what it feels like. We're at all-out war. And A New Hope is not all-out war. It is like they're just in the beginnings of, like, the ending of A New Hope, I always thought, was the beginning of the war. They attack the Death Star, they blow it up, and then that kind of launches through Empire and Jedi the subsequent battles. So this movie kind of, like, messes with that timeline, and it.
Oh, I mean, any nation or a world or system whose ships were involved in that attack, that would have been it. That would have been open warfare declared. You wouldn't have had to test the weapon. You would have just said, "Great, we're at war now. We're gonna blow a couple of these planets' systems up, like, just to do it, just because this is war now." Like, you wouldn't be displaying the power of the weapon anymore. You would find the planets that attacked your installation. You wouldn't be thinking about what planet to blow up. You'd be like, "What? This system had sent a fleet to attack this planet of ours. Great, we're going to blow up that planet. Decisions made for us," and then the rest of the systems would come in line.
Yeah, and the other issue I had with, even, like, within this movie, not thinking of how it connects to A New Hope, I kept thinking to myself, there's elements from those three movies that we could bring into this, that we could be bridging into the story that would give it more effect. And, maybe there could be a Lando in this story. Maybe I could see Sky City and see what deal he makes that we don't know about. You know what I mean? Like, we could see what happens there. There's all kinds of stuff that happens in those movies that you could give little pieces of backstory to. And instead we went with this kind of, like, self-contained thing. And I guess I get the idea of it from an artistic standpoint. My positives with the movie, for every positive I have, it's almost like with a caveat. So, like, the movie looks amazing, is probably the only positive I have that I have no caveats, because it does look good. But, like, if we're talking about, the characters, then we're going to have to talk about what we didn't do with them. If we're going to talk about the pacing, then we're going to have to talk about how, like, the last 40 minutes felt like 3 hours. If we're going to talk about how cool it was that they gave us more planets, we're going to say they gave us too many planets, because I was very confused at certain points where we were at and why we were there. So what about you? Do you have any positives that kind of stand alone with this film?
I think that the and they did some things intentionally to do this. They used period pieced lenses. I guess the easier way to say that is they took some of the technology and lenses that would have been used to film Star Wars in the time that it was originally filmed, and they used some of those, augmenting the cameras that they have now with those. They retained a great look, it for the most part felt like a good film. The texture, the color of everything, So I definitely thought that was positive. Where they could have gone, I mean, they introduced it was an excellent story, like what happened to get the Death Star plant. So that was a great idea. And some aspects of the story were good. Jin's character and like I guess her placement between her and her father and the building of the super weapon, I mean that was a great idea. So there were some positives out of the movie. I think it'll serve as a vehicle to keep people engaged while we wait for episode 8 and wait for the Boba Fett flick and then the Han Solo flick. Beyond that, I didn't like the writing. It was too all over the place. I don't know if that's because it was written that way or if the directing was poor.
I think you were right.
Beyond
in that it was,
the things I just mentioned, I didn't like it.
There was probably a lot of reshoots because I felt like things were like changing on a dime, like, and it definitely had the story by committee syndrome a little bit, which I'm assuming, and I get you're going to spend $200 million to make a movie. You know, you want more than one person to give an opinion or advice, but I'm with you, man. The thing you started off this podcast by saying was that you're no longer excited for these other like in-betweener movies, and I am right there with you. I'm like very concerned that if this is the style, I guess the only saving grace will be is that each story is a chance for a different director and perhaps a different writer to kind of give some backstory. So perhaps there'll be a better take on this. But I really feel like this was one they dropped the ball with that could have. Okay, we're gonna find out the backstory to the Death Star. Oh, cool. I like the Death Star. It's been blown up a bunch. I'd kind of like to know why it was so easy to blow it up. That's great. And I didn't learn anything. So do you find yourself placing this movie in canon with the other ones, or are you going to set it aside and kind of think of it as its own thing?
I actually, in my head, the way it feels to me, it feels very kindred to episodes 4, 5, and 6. You know, it wasn't like martial artsy, you know, well, except for the stereotypical Asian guy. It wasn't martial artsy like episodes 1, 2, and 3. It was heavy. You know, nothing was slick. Nothing was smooth. Everything looked old and beaten and worn. The characters looked, the good guys, the bad guys, everybody looked old, beaten, and worn. And it holds that kind of a feel for me. So I do kind of lump it in as a more direct prequel to 4, 5, and 6, not just timeline-wise, but just with the way that I think and feel about it. I liked it. I mean, I liked it as a better movie than 1, 2, and 3. I maybe liked the story of 1, 2, and 3 a little better, but this is probably the fourth or fifth best Star Wars flick.
Yeah, so better than the prequels. You're more.
I think so. I mean, I think I would enjoy it more than the prequels. I mean, it at least had the humor in it wasn't too cheesy. It was at least kind of topical. They weren't making a joke of a joke. Like the humor in episodes 1, 2, and 3, they were just making a joke of the joke that C-3PO and R2-D2 already were. Which was weird. They parodied a parody. Where in this one, you know, it seemed a little more genuine. And I do like the fact that they show. I mean, this is the first glimpse of what, you know. So the episodes 1, 2, and 3 paint this what was once a utopia, so to speak, of systems, right, brought together. And it's kind of collapsed, but everything looked great. The cities were grand, the people were beautiful, the ships were beautiful, everything was slick, it was modern. And then this is the first glimpse that we get of what happens post that, when the whole Republic falls and then the Empire's created and everything kind of falls apart. This is what it looks like, you know, I guess 20 years or so later, which is nice. It does give like a little insight as to what life has been around the system since.
Well, and I was super stoked to see like Darth Vader's little like vacation getaway, like on that lava planet, was awesome looking. I really liked just the different like architectural looks of the different worlds that kind of felt like there was like an ancient, you know, ruin type built up into a modern place, and it was very, very timeless looking. They did a very good job with the sets and the locations. I also thought that even though he should have been in it more, the Darth Vader shots we got, like with him being inside of that like that cryo tank or whatever that was that had to drain before he could like don his costume, very cool. Just like Just very cool things.
I think that was supposed to be, if I'm not mistaken, that looked to me a lot like a Kolto tank that you see in some of the video games.
Yes.
Something that they used to heal themselves. I don't know if that's true, but it looked like, I don't know. It looked like something that kind of looks like milk, but not milk, water. I don't know. Looked kind of gross. You figure with Darth Vader's history, he would avoid volcanic planets with lots of lava around, but no, he decides to just park right up on one and say, you know what, we're gonna face this fear head on. It's kind of
I'm
admirable,
gonna have
if you ask
literally
me.
a moat of lava through my living room because that's essentially what they did.
Yes.
Like I'm gonna have to walk over it every time I want to go to the refrigerator. I'm just going to learn to live with this phobia. No, that's wow. That might be the money shot of the podcast. Wow. So I'm with you. I'm probably giving this film a C minus. Because as a standalone film, like if I've never seen Star Wars, I think it's not a good film, and I don't know that I want to rewatch it, but I probably would, and I want to rewatch it more than Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, so I can't say it's an F because it's somewhere in the middle, and it might be one of those things that I know we don't need more Death Star movies, but let's say they had kept some of these characters alive. And they had done it in between 4 and 5, kind of in the same way, kind of bridging the end of one movie to the beginning of the next with some carryover. I feel like that maybe would have helped make this film a better film, but because it's a closed book, it is what it is, and there's no way they can go back to the story. And maybe it's for the best, but I'm not saying I needed 3 films of this, but I definitely saw an opportunity. I was really the Cassian character. I was really enjoying. And I thought it was a shame that we just kind of lost him right when he was getting going, So he probably had more character development than anybody in the film, from where he starts to where he ends up, and it just
he got the closest to a character that I wanted to give a crap about, mostly because I guess there was a lot of mystery behind him and his motivations. They don't talk much about it. He seemed like kind of like this everyman caught up in this thing that he'd want to be a part of, but had no choice. Jin's character is a little too typical for me to really get attached to. One thing that I think that we should all keep in mind, the people involved with writing Rogue One, they're not. I don't think that they're anybody that any of us really care about. They haven't really written a lot of stuff that I think would lend it that we would even see as great, let alone in the same vein of what we're talking about. But with the future Han Solo movie coming up, well, now we've got the guy who wrote Episode 5, Episode 6, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Wyatt Earp. I mean, these are good. Silverado. I mean, these are really, really good flicks. Spanning kind of like a few different genres in there. So hopefully with the Han Solo flick, we get something that is less broken apart or less fractured seeming, and something a little more solid, and something that we can all enjoy a little more.
Well, and that was kind of my hope, is that regardless of my feelings about this movie, I'm assuming that 8 and 9 are on a different trajectory with a different creative team, and so hopefully none of this will bleed into that, or this isn't a sign of that. The issues with this movie are so easy to resolve. That's what frustrates me. And I think that, I was reading reviews, getting ready for this podcast, and I was thinking to myself, what don't I get? Because there's some really, it's pretty universally praised. And there was some really strong positive words given to this film by some writers I really respect. Though I suspect that they're not necessarily science fiction fans, and so perhaps they're, measuring it against a idea of what they think the genre wants, and I think that can sometimes maybe color how good you think something is. Like, if you're listening to a rap album and you don't listen to rap music, and you're like, oh, it sounds like it'd be a really good rap album, you're missing the point because you're not indoctrinated with the subtleties of the genre. And I think this is the same with this kind of film. But perhaps it's that we're being hard on it, or perhaps it's that I'm expecting a lot from it because it's the marquee flagship for science fiction, and you've got unlimited resources and you've got unlimited time, so why not hit it out of the park? And when the mistakes are storytelling mistakes that are like, I feel like film students learn about this. Like, this isn't like, we're not talking about really complicated things here. We're talking about just kind of getting to the nitty gritty of like how you develop a character, how you tell a 3-act story, how you create an arc, how you create conflict. Like, they failed on so many levels that it was just hard for me not to be like, there goes another opportunity. And I guess it also kind of gets George Lucas a little bit off, George Lucas off the hook a little bit with me, because he's not responsible for this,
No, he is definitely not. There's one thing that we may not have liked some things about the prequels, and we may have thought Metachlorians are stupid, Jar Jar Binks is stupid. There's a lot of things about those that bother us, but I never not understood any of the characters' motivations. I never not understood how one piece of the plot fit into another one. I never didn't get how it had to fit in that. And if anything, those 3 movies actually added up to a pretty intricate story that, we might have thought some characters were too whiny or not acted great, or maybe the CGI was too heavy-handed, but I got the story. I understood the characters. I understood Anakin and his attachment to Palpatine and his betrayal of Obi-Wan. I got all of that. I was never lost on any of that, as dumb as I thought maybe those movies looked. So, again, I don't ever like to get on a dump fest about George Lucas, because like you and I have discussed, it's been done. Everybody knows what everybody doesn't like about the Star Warses, but he didn't make this movie. I wouldn't, and I would enjoy watching it more than the prequels. I'm not saying that it's a worse movie than those, but in many regards, as far as nailing story and characters, as dumb as it might have looked or felt, he never had that problem.
No, I agree with that. Yeah, this particular film really had some glaring issues, and I fear that if I watched it a second time, like you've pointed out 2 or 3 things that I didn't even notice. So I'm really worried that like a second viewing is going to make me just be like, oh, this is garbage. And my last question for you was going to be, what could they have done better? But I'm kind of feeling like the obligatory answer is just start over and try again. Like, I don't know.
What they could have done better was make it Darth Vader versus the Alliance. Make it Darth Vader trying to figure this Alliance out, and the Alliance trying to figure out Darth Vader. That would have been a great story. Maybe it's Darth Vader that forced Jin's father to work on that thing. And Darth Vader, they already have the plans. And they're looking for Jin to help them get the plans to Leia. And everybody's looking for Jin to help get the plans to Leia. And Darth Vader's looking for the Alliance while looking for their... Make it a chase. Make it something where we can see Darth Vader being Darth Vader just a little more, where technology didn't quite allow it the first time around. That's what I think would have made the movie better.
I thought when I sat down to watch this in the theaters, I assumed the story was going to be that Jin and her father are captured, and that he works on the Death Star while she's in prison, and that she escapes with the plans, and that's her story. And I was very confused about 3 minutes into the film when she wasn't captured. Wait, then why is he going to do it? Like, why doesn't he just say, just kill me? Like, you don't have my daughter. And so that, they lost me. Like, I mean, we didn't even make it. I didn't even like start, eating the popcorn yet. And I was already like, what? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, this guy is such a good guy that he walked away. So why is he going to go back? And I still, we were laughing at, a couple months ago about how, it's like, folklore almost. Like, we built this flaw we accidentally made a flaw in the Death Star that was so easily exploited. And so it was like, oh, that's going to be so cool. We're going to find out what the problem was. But I'm still confused because the flaw isn't really a flaw. It required a Herculean effort to even figure out what the flaw was. And then after that, it required like space magic and wizardry and the Force and like light beams that can like bend on 90-degree angles. Like it wasn't, he did not handicap the Death Star. And like, honestly, like it just wasn't, I'm still kind of confused. Like right. Like, I mean, everything had to line up perfectly. So there was no way that that this
Well,
guy foresaw.
He's a scientist. Nobody ever said he was a master schemer.
But then
Apparently.
so that I think he's probably guilty of corroborating with the Empire, and I'm glad he died. But that doesn't do anything
Yes.
for the movie, and it doesn't really help explain anybody's motivations. And I agree with you. Like, in this type of storytelling, if you're going to leave it up to me, give me something to chew on. But if you're not going to give me anything, and then you're going to leave it up to me, then what you've really done is you've failed to create a compelling story, and you've reveled in ambiguity. And I think that when I think back on this movie, I'm going to think wasted opportunity, and darn, it looked cool. I hope the next episode 8 looks that cool, and that's it. Because it actually probably looked better than episode 7 in some ways. I didn't know that, what you just said about them using like period lenses and stuff. That's a very interesting production technique that I give them props for.
Yeah, and I would like to assume, I mean, that was a blurb that I had gotten when I was doing some research, and I would like to assume that that's not the only thing that they did to try to attempt to pull it off. But I would agree that it did retain like a kind of like a grittiness that, you know, I think episodes 4, 5, and 6 also kind of had. Obviously, not to the same degree. To go back to what you said about if you're going to leave it up to me, make it something captivating that we can hold on to. I mean, there's several movies that do that very well. I think you take a movie like Fight Club, where it leaves it to you to be the one who's trying to think the whole time of what's really going on. And also even kind of the ending, you're still left talking about and trying to think, you know, they really did leave it up to you to make up a lot of this as the movie went along. But again, trimmer story, fewer characters, and characters that were captivating. It was only like a handful of them. Like you said here, they really wanted to leave it up to you, but they gave way too much and nothing that anybody could hold on to. I would completely agree with you.
Well, it's like you're making a movie that is very obviously geared towards a 8 to 12 or an 8 to 14-year-old demographic. But then you're also including in this movie some very like heady moral dilemma, highbrow stuff that is at best, you know, you're scraping the barrel with giving me any sort of outline for these characters. And, you know, we talked about this in the last podcast, but I really, really, really have an issue with genocide and mass destruction being used as storytelling devices. And it's done twice in this film. And again, I feel like this is not, with this type of movie, there's more clever, more black and white ways to get the point across that maybe don't dehumanize life so much. And I'm not trying to like rally against violence and all that, but I do feel like, you know, this movie is made for 10-year-olds. And I just wonder, like, can we put our collective heads together and come up with something that, you know, maybe makes more sense, that makes more sense for the characters and the audience. And I will give George Lucas credit. You know, he tried very hard with the prequels to do that, to get the movies back in line with something. Like, he was trying to make films, especially with The Phantom Menace, because he was hoping that the audience would be a bit younger and then the audience would grow with the films. You know, we're using droids and we're using aliens and things that we're not seeing people just being, you know, shot and killed. And I you know, I'm not an anti-violence guy, but I do think that storytelling device, like, it so desensitizes you to anything else that can happen. I mean, at this point, you've killed every character with the Death Star, and I didn't even care about them. So what? I'm still confused. Why do I care when you blow up Alderaan? Like, why am I upset about it? You know, like, I get it. Like, we need to blow it up because it's a strategic weapon that, like, we need to fight against. But from a, you know, an emotional investment, it would have been much more effective if Cassian had been captured by Darth Vader, and then Darth Vader had killed him. And, like, you saw that happen. That would have been more effective than any of the other scenes we saw in the movie.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It certainly makes destroying Alderaan less special. I don't mean that as a joke, but it sounds kind of silly to say that, like, when you go back and you're gonna rewrite, you're gonna write something that's going to make us rethink something we already know. So you've made a prequel. A really good example of you know, the guy who sold the tribbles in the original series Star Trek episode, that guy. there was a discussion I heard once, and I didn't know this, but I think it was eventually revealed in some sort of a canon book or something that guy was a Q. And I remember having this discussion and thinking this in my head but wait a minute. So for decades of me watching Star Trek, that guy is just a guy, right? He's just an a-hole who sold something that he thought was obnoxious that caused all this trouble. Now, I'm supposed to just accept the last 30 years or 20 years, I forgot how old I was at the time, of how I understood this one simple character in Star Trek. Now I'm supposed to accept that all of a sudden this is a Q, even though for 20 years he's just a guy. And it's when you have this power to rewrite what people are going to think or rewrite things that are going to have an impact on something we've already known, I think you need to be a little delicate with it. Now, that's a very minor point, and it was more of like a logical argument than it was anything else. Nobody gives a crap about the guy who sold the tribbles on the space station in the original series, but we do care about the destruction of Alderaan with the Death Star, and there was a lot of drama to it. Now, also too, we do care about how Darth Vader got on board Leia's ship, and there was some tension and drama there. Now, I kind of think when Darth Vader boards Leia's ship is kind of silly and stupid, because none of that dialogue makes any sense to me anymore because of the already mentioned terrorist attack on the planet that they freshly arrived from. Also, well, you've used the space station twice, and we know that it can do a lot more than what you've shown because you flat out said so. So now, this moment that I thought was very dramatic and emotional growing up for 20 years of my, viewing history and memory, 30 years of it, now it's different. Now I don't find it special anymore. I don't find it dramatic. I don't find your killing of the entire planet very heavy-handed because now me and the Alliance already knows you're capable of it. Why is the Alliance surprised? They aren't getting reports from the people who watched this happen once and then twice at the planet. They know this thing can fire that blast off, and they know that it can do these things. So Leia's surprise, none of it makes sense to me anymore. They kind of screwed it all up.
Well, and there was this other aspect of watching A New Hope for the first or second time and wondering why is Vader and Leia on the same political standing? It was interesting. He boards the ship, but he boards the ship like a Gestapo or a police officer, not like a supervillain. So at the end of this film, he is essentially committing a crime because he's boarding a vessel of the Empire, or that he's not supposed to know as part of the Alliance, but now he knows because he just watched this firefight. But when he then, an hour later is boarding Leia's ship, that's not how he boards it, and there was a reason for it.
No.
And they talk to each other as if they're political rivals, which
Well, they're equals. I mean, it's because right now it's all politics. It's not war yet. Nothing here is war yet. It's more like piracy and political intrigue, but fresh off of a big firefight over this planet where you flat out know that these plans were stolen. Well, now it's war.
Thousands that Star Destroyer alone, hundreds of thousands of people have died. It doesn't make any sense. And what really gave weight to those early scenes was when you realize that's his daughter. Later on in the movies, you're like, oh crap, that's awesome. Oh my god, he didn't even know he was talking to his own daughter. That, you lose all of that. We've lost all of it. And so I don't know, man. I guess the other thing that we should touch on before we we end this is the recent passing of Carrie Fisher, and what does that mean going forward for Star Wars
and Debbie Reynolds.
Sadly, within a couple days of each other. I don't think anybody was aware that Carrie Fisher was sick. She suffered a heart attack while on a flight, and then died a couple days later. So it might have just been out of the blue. And she's relatively young, too. I think she was 62 or 60. So they didn't CGI her in this film because they knew she was sick. They CGI'd her because they needed her to look 20 years old. And we've already touched upon that, but I thought it was kind of weird and creepy. But that being said, now that she has passed away, I'm assuming, there was a required reprisal of her role for the next film at the very least. Have you heard anything? Have you read anything? Is there footage in the can? Will they recast? What do you think this means for this franchise going forward?
I've been digging, and I haven't seen like an official response of what they're gonna. I know that they wrapped up 8 already, so that was already done. So what they're gonna do with 9, I don't think. That question's been posed many times, and I've been looking and looking like every day. Maybe somebody else has heard, but I haven't seen like an official response of what they plan to do with her and episode 9.
How do you feel going forward? I'm assuming she'll be the first of, countless characters that are going to eventually pass away. We're getting to that point with movies like we were with music this past year, where it's just a matter of time. And I love David Bowie and I love Leonard Cohen, but when you live to 70 or 80 years old, you've lived a long life, and you just can't live forever, and it just happens. How do you feel that with her passing, and then the thought of perhaps Mark Hamill or Harrison Ford or Clint Eastwood? I mean, all these actors that are getting up there. Do you have any emotions or thoughts with that, or is it just kind of like?
Yeah. Yeah, my childhood of movie viewing is dropping like flies. Eastwood's an old guy. Stallone's an old guy. I've probably seen more Eastwood and Stallone flicks than any one actor, and they're not. I mean, they can't be far off. Mark Hamill, I don't know much of. I love Star Wars, and his Joker is fantastic, and but again, he's not that old either. I just think that he doesn't look great. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to know. I don't know how healthy. I don't know the health of any of these people. But I think to myself that it's all kind of getting wrapped up. I'm getting middle aged. All the musicians and actors that I loved they're passing, and I suppose that is what it is. And then I don't know. Maybe that's how we measure when we're on the other side of that hill. Is well. At some point we're all going to be moving on too. But I really hope that they don't try to put Carrie Fisher or Leia in episode 9 unless they do a full recast, which I would at least admire from the aspect that it takes balls to do it. I just really hope that they leave her out.
Well, with Harrison Ford's character essentially having no reason to be in these next 2 films, perhaps it does tie up that loose end, if she's already done with 8. I think that we are the first generation, you and I are, who grew up in the 80s. We are a generation that not only was raised on television, like children of the 70s, but raised on video games, raised on our involvement with movies and television shows was on multiple platforms. I didn't just watch Star Wars as a kid. I watched it. I played the game with you. I read the comic book. You know what I'm saying? Like, we had the action figures. It went above and beyond. And I think what ends up happening is that things like this that tether you to your 5-year-old self or your 10-year-old self, the outpouring of emotion I saw from people across the world, especially people our age and older, it was kind of like your aunt died or somebody you grew up with. Maybe not somebody you ever, had a deep conversation with, but somebody you knew and felt. And that'll be an interesting thing that we're going to see more of, because this film in particular, Star Wars, is not just a movie. It is a cultural phenomenon. It has spanned the globe. I feel like it is as identifiable as anything. And it's not Star Trek. It is Star Trek times a million. It is so above and beyond with how wide the spread is. And so I think it'll be an interesting thing. I wish everybody the best, and anybody who was close to her, I'm sure they're probably reeling over it, but especially because it wasn't expected. But I think it does this movie kind of cements the idea that we're going forward, and episode 7 did this a little bit too, that we're going forward and it's going to be a new cast of people, and it's going to be a new story, and it's going to continue on. And so we'll see. It'll be hard to measure this franchise against itself the further it gets into it, because it's going to spread so many different kind of casts of people and characters. But and now that there's a different creative hand at the helm, so it'll be interesting. It's almost like Rogue One is a franchise. is like a franchise.
Well, it could be, sure.
It is like a piece, like a franchise off of a franchise. It's and they're going to continue, not unlike what Star Trek did, in a television format, kind of building a new show around a new group of people. So it'll be interesting. And then the last question I'm going to ask you is, I had read this online and it was an interesting thought. Do you feel the Star Wars universe could hold water as a weekly television show in the way that Star Trek has? Slash, would you watch it if it was presented in that way? I mean,
yeah, but it would have to be focused around a Jedi, and it would have to be like an ongoing like development of like that character.
They've done it with Marvel. They did it with Terminator. They've taken movies and done this.
Yeah, it could. As always, it's all in the casting and the execution. Do I have a lot of faith that they would pull it off well? No, because Star Wars these days seems to be a rush. Everybody's rushing to get it done, to get the thing done, to get it out. I just don't have a lot of faith that it wouldn't be rushed or pushed too quickly. I think that it would be used as a device to get people still hooked on the movies. That's kind of like where I think that would go.
I don't disagree. It's an interesting idea, but the fact that I'm initially hesitant, or I view it with trepidation, I think speaks to the mixed results of the movies, and it would have to be well done. It couldn't just simply be the movies told in a television format. I just don't think it would work. It barely works in a movie format.
Exactly that, and that's the thing. Like they can't take the movie and not rush through it, and they can't well pace a movie. I mean, the Marvel movies are a good example of throwing too much crap into it, but it's still being good to a degree. When the episode 7 didn't have it had a lot going on. It just bordered on too much going on. It kind of like teetered there, but they held it back enough, and they kept it a little more focal in the story. But if the Han Solo movie is good, I mean, that could have been maybe a good TV show. It just depends on, I guess, like the concept and who's doing it.
So, with that being said, any final thoughts from Rogue One or Star Wars in general?
Rogue One, nothing that I haven't said already. I wasn't a big fan of the flick. I don't know. I don't see this as one of those ones that grows on me with time, but who knows? I've been surprised that way before. I just hope that episode 8 works at being a lot better, and I hope that the Han Solo flick pans out to be really good.
Well, I assume we'll be back here in a year talking about episode 8. So until then, thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to Geek USA. Follow us on Twitter at Geek USA Podcast.